It was the age of cotton, a time when a third of all Southerners lived in bondage, an era of extraordinary wealth sustained by unimaginable brutality. In the 1850s, Harriet Jacobs began to pen an autobiography she would call Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. She would become the first woman to write a slave narrative, published works written by African Americans who had escaped lives of bondage. At a time when state laws in the South made it a crime to teach the enslaved reading and writing, Harriet would use her words to reveal the awful truth of American slavery. Her story begins in the coastal town of Edenton, North Carolina, where she was born in 1813. Harriet's first owner had ignored the law and taught her to read and write. After she died, Harriet was willed to the 3-year-old daughter of Dr. James Norcom. 12 years old, with light skin and dark eyes, Harriet became a house slave. She was to cook and clean and serve the wishes of the mistress and the master.
Even the little child will learn that if God has bestowed beauty upon her, it will prove her greatest curse.
Harriet Jacobs calls slavery a cage of obscene birds. Harriet says that no matter what the slave girl looks like, if she's dark, if she's light, if she's medium, if she's at all attractive, if she has beauty, it's a curse, because the master will be after her.
Dr. Norcom was a man widely admired in the community. He took an unmistakable interest in his new house slave, a girl 40 years his junior.
My master began to whisper foul words in my ear. He peopled my young mind with unclean images, such as only a vile monster could think of. He met me at every turn, reminding me that I belonged to him, and swearing by heaven and earth that he would compel me to submit to him.
She's just completely drowning in this harassment and in this sexual situation. He doesn't want to force her. He wants to convince her. He wants to control her. He wants to control her mind. She says, "My master had money and power on his side. I had a determined will. There is might in each." Wonderful line. So she's in a war, and really from the time she's 12, 13, 14, she understands it, because she isn't his victim. She's his enemy.
Harriet knew that the doctor was the father of 11 slave children.
Norcom had many children outside of his legal marriage. And what Harriet tells us, that he tended to sell the children off.
The practice was not unusual. Mulattoes, wrote a slaveholder's wife, are as common as blackberries.
The rates of interracial children being born may have actually been higher then than any time since.
So no white man ever had to feel like he was in fact raping a black woman if he took her against her will. In fact, if you look through the court records, you will find that the judges often say there is no such thing as the rape of a black woman. The courts do not recognize it.
At 15, Harriet believed she had finally found her rescuer, Samuel Treadwell Sawyer. The 30-year-old lawyer was from one of North Carolina's most important families.
He says that he's concerned about her. How does she feel? Imagine you're 15 years old and a charming young man, I mean, he's not so young, he's twice as old as she is actually, he's almost 30, comes and expresses concern. "I am your friend," he says. "You know where that goes."
Harriet was convinced that a man of such power and influence would be able to free her.
It is a Hollywood dream more than a century before Hollywood. But it had happened to another young woman in the town, and she knew the story, and the whole town knew the story of Rose Cabarrus and how she had really managed to get her young master to fall in love with her. And he had, in fact, freed their children, and he had, in fact, freed her, and he had, in fact, even freed her mother. So there was a model for this wild alternative.
Within a year of starting her relationship with Sawyer, Harriet gave birth to a son. By law, her child was owned, as she was, by Norcom. For Harriet Jacobs, life under Norcom's grip would become intolerable and far more complicated. At 19, she gave birth to another child by Sawyer, a daughter. Sawyer offered to buy the children. Norcom not only refused, he wanted revenge.
Norcom is threatening to send her children to a plantation of his that's known for brutalizing slaves. Harriet uses the word brutalizing, that's what we would call traumatizing. And when she speaks of what happens to people, their hearts get broken, their psyches get broken. They're not themselves afterwards.
Slowly, the realization came. If she were gone, Norcom would relinquish the children. The only way to save her children was to leave them. In 1835, Harriet fled into nearby swamps until her grandmother, a free woman living in Edenton, arranged for a more permanent hideout. Soon after, Harriet was secreted away in a tiny space beneath the roof of her grandmother's house. Harriet's world would now shrink to a space 9 feet long, 7 feet wide, and 3 feet high.
If you take a very large library table and get under the library table, that's the kind of space that you're talking about.
Rats and mice ran over my bed. I was restless for want of air. The atmosphere was so stifled that even mosquitoes would not condescend to buzz in it. I suffered for air even more than for light.
She suffers from heat, she suffers from cold. From time to time, she can come down and walk around a little bit, but she's under house arrest, basically.
She was literally a prisoner who made herself a prisoner, and I guess that's how she did it. She survived as prisoners do.
Within weeks, Harriet learned that Sawyer had bought the children and was sending them to live at her grandmother's house. Still, Harriet continued to live a secret existence, just a floor apart from her children.
The thing that holds her back is her devotion to her children. And that was, for a lot of slave women, the thing that kept them from running away. There were a great deal more male runaways, and the typical runaway was a young male who didn't have children. For slave women, they just didn't want to run away without their children.
Days slipped into months, months into years. Harriet filled her time writing, reading, and sewing.
She describes some psychotic episodes. She talks about hearing voices, and she talks about seeing things. And she talks about passing out, and they have to bring her to.
She bore a tiny hole through one of the walls. On occasion, she could catch a glimpse of her children playing nearby, comforting herself in the knowledge that she had freed them from Norcom's hold.
Countless were the nights that I sat late at the little loophole, scarcely large enough to give me a glimpse of one twinkling star. Season after season, year after year, I peeped at my children's faces and heard their sweet voices, with a heart yearning all the while to say, "Your mother is here."
I think that her psychic strength reflects that of all slave women, because slavery demanded a different kind of womanhood. It demanded that people be self-reliant. It demanded that they try to do everything that they could to protect themselves. But she has the strength and resilience that African American women had to develop to survive slavery.
In 1842, Harriet Jacobs had lived in her cramped, dark space for almost 7 years.
It appeared to me as if ages had rolled away since I entered upon that gloomy, monotonous existence. My friends feared I should become a cripple. Had it not been for the hope of serving my children, I should have been thankful to die. Dark thoughts passed through my mind as I lay there day after day. I tried to be grateful for my little cell, and even to love it as part of the price I had paid for the redemption of my children.
Now, after all those years of confinement, Harriet's secret was about to be exposed. A neighbor's untrustworthy slave had stumbled upon Harriet's hideaway. A ship captain, known for smuggling runaways, offered to help. Off the coast of Edenton, arrangements were made for Harriet's escape.
I was on deck as soon as the day dawned. I watched the reddening sky and saw the great orb come up slowly out of the water. Soon the waves began to sparkle and everything caught the beautiful glow. I had never realized what grand things air and sunlight are till I had been deprived of them.